propagator at Fort Collins Wholesale Nursery for 30 years. And prior to that, I had a nursery in Fort Collins that specialized in edible plants because that was my first love. And I had my rich uncle had given me $6,000 to start my nursery. And I guess now I kind of learned that my rich uncle really wasn't that rich. And that wasn't enough to start a business. And so I went out of business within 2 years and paid him back every cent he loaned me and took the job at the nursery. But in the meantime, edible plants was my true love. And so I have a horticulture degree from CSU in landscape management. And I first started out in Fort Collins. It was my hometown, but I had bought a house that was $80,000 and sold it for $240,000. And then I drove by this place. Let me see, where is the? I don't think there's a remote. Okay, gotcha. So I drove by this place, and it was 3 acres, and the sign said, "Bring your horses." And it was perfect because they had a pasture in the back, and then you could rotate to the front, and there was loafing sheds in the back, and what I saw was, I'm going to get those fences up, and I'm going to plant trees. And so I did, and I turned it into this. And so I took my driveway, first thing I did is because I wanted a windbreak on the west, on the left side of the screen from my neighbors, brought in 60 yards of topsoil, moved the driveway. My elderly mother, I built her a house for her to live in. That's the red building. I put a greenhouse in, planted 60 fruit trees. I have 30 different grapes. I have raspberry patches, gooseberry patches. I have moved my vegetable garden to the right side of my greenhouse. And if you look closely, you can see that I believe in mulch rings around trees. My mentor was the last director of the USDA horticulture station. Oh, thank you. Thank you. In Cheyenne. And he used to call grass green death. And green death grass is very useful, as we know, but it's so good at outcompeting the plants from water and nutrients. And so if you want to have your trees and shrubs to survive better, get the grass away and put mulch in. So when I first started, I told you I had my business, and I quickly learned that the places to sell plants were the farmer's market, because I didn't have a brick and mortar nursery, so I'd take them to the farmer's market. Started going to Cheyenne, because my father's from Wyoming, and so I did some of you might remember me from the farmer's market. I went there for 23 years, and I sold plants there until my children all grew old, and they said, "Dad, I don't want to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and drive to the farmer's market every Saturday morning." And so that's when I lost my captive labor and stopped at the farmer's market. But when I mentioned my father being from Wyoming, my second great-grandfather came from Iowa in 1876, 2 years after Custer, to strike it rich in the Deadwood gold fields. And he was just a 25-year-old young man, and family lore passed on through my great-grandmother said that Deadwood was filled with ruffians. They're like cutthroats and murderers and con men, And he quickly said, I got to get out of here. So he just said, I'm going west, see what's there. He didn't know what to expect. He got 1 mile over the Wyoming border. He probably didn't even know he was in Wyoming. And he ran into a guy by the name of Alex Moorcroft. And Moorcroft was the founder of what was to be known as Beulah, and also Moorcroft, Wyoming was named after him. And he stopped him. He goes, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm just looking for a place to live. He says, you should come here. Look down into that valley, and there was an Indian village in the valley, and there's 2 creeks running through the Sand Creek and the Redwater. And he says, the Army's going to move the Indians onto the reservation, and once they leave, that's where I'm going to do my homestead. So I dibs where modern-day Beulah was, and Moorcroft started building this town. Now, if you look at that slide, Beulah's only what's left of Beulah is on the left side. Everything on the right side was taken up when they built I-90, and they needed to make it elevated. So Beulah is pretty much gone, but just a couple buildings from that original photograph. But at the time, my second great grandfather's name was Bear Paw Pete, and he had this, there was nobody to get married to, so he sent away as a mail order bride to Luxembourg, and Anna Ginninger came, and she had 6 children in a cave. And I can imagine the letters home to her mom. Mom, what have I done? I have to live in a cave. But look, she's still smiling. She's still smiling. But her business was a hotel. That's her. Everybody in that picture are my kin. My great-grandmother's in there. My second great-grandfather, second great-grandmother, and my grandmother's in that picture. But the whole town back in those days, you had to grow your own food, or hunt and fish or gather your own food. And so the woman on the right was my dad's favorite aunt, and that was Aunt Lou, and she had a truck farm, and she grew nothing but root crops, potatoes and turnips and rutabagas and beets. And she sold them to miners in Deadwood and at the Homestead Mine. And if you look closely on the picture, there's apples on both sides of the people. And so that's how they survived back in those days. And farming was important. And you look at this next slide here, look at the apples from Fremont County, where Lander is, at the Wyoming State Fair in 1915. Look what you could grow. You wouldn't even think that Wyoming could have crops of apples that wonderful. But you can. You probably can't make a living off of it these days because of hail, things like that, and having to compete against, Washington State with gigantic cold storage units, which can keep apples for 18 months in perfect conditions, because we can't grow those apples because they ripen too late. We have to choose the varieties that are ripen usually by the end of September is usually what you have to choose. So if you look at my handout, I was asked, I usually will start with apples, but because I've given this talk quite a few times, and they asked me to talk about the small fruits first. So I'm going to be talking backwards, but the time period is, judging from the last talk, I didn't make it to the fruits, but I gave you the varieties that you should try based on my long experience of what grows here. Many of them were from the testing that was done here in Cheyenne of 1,500 different types of fruit trees over 4 decades, culminating with the USDA publication of which is noted on the last page, and all of those are online. So all you have to do is just type in the title, and the PDF will come up so you can get all that information at your fingertips just on your computer. So the first one I want to talk about are raspberries. Now raspberries, back in the day, raspberries were biennials. They would grow up the first year, didn't give you a crop, and then the second year they would grow a little bit more and then give you a summer crop. In the meantime, suckers would come up from the base, and those would be next year's barrenless canes, and then they would bear fruit the second year, and those were called floricanes or biennial raspberries. And University of Minnesota had a variety that just beat the world. It was called Latham. I don't even have it on the list. It's probably really hard to find. But back in the day, if any people around here remember Jack Shaw, anybody knew Jack Shaw? He lived over just close by over here on Jefferson on the south side of the Interstate 80. And he would come to the farmer's market because he had a big patch of Latham, and he would sell Latham to everybody. So they're probably all over in people's backyard. You don't even know it because, that was back in the 80s and 90s. And so I had heard about these primocane raspberries, and I knew all about them, but I didn't bring them to the farmer's market because I didn't want to take any business from good old Jack Shaw, because he was selling a good product, and I just wanted to do the neighborly thing, so I didn't talk about Latham. I didn't sell Latham. But remember the word primocane. Back in the 1950s, Cornell University came out with Heritage. It was the very first where they found that raspberries on primocane, the first year growth, would grow up, and then in the fall, they flowered and gave you fruit. This is revolutionized raspberry growth, because you can now take a lawnmower after the plants have been killed by cold and mow your patch, and then rake them up, throw away the old canes because they might have cane borer in them, just to make sure you didn't pass along that insect that was pupating inside the cane. And so you wouldn't get them coming the next year. Throw it away, and then they would come up from the roots, give you a new crop, mow them down, new would come every year. It's just the way it goes. So all the varieties of raspberries that are denoted there are all primocane raspberries. And primocane has dominated in cold climate raspberry culture. So they came with all the different colors. Here's a really good one called Anne. It's just a golden one and ripens perfection as an orange fruit. And it's really good one. So if you see any type of raspberry, like on that list, it might say Fall Gold or Autumn Bliss or Autumn Britain, anything that denotes fall is a primocane raspberry. It's a way to tell. So that has happened with this next one, the black raspberry, which has up until recently has been a very cold hardy floricane, which is a biennial, where the first growth would come out in a black raspberry, not give you a crop, and then it would start just growing out from there the second year and give you a big crop. Now, black raspberries have been fairly hardy, not like the majority of raspberries, but a man by the name of Peter Tallman, who was a member of the North American Fruit Explorers, who lived in Longmont, found a primocane black raspberry hiking in the woods of his home state in New York. And he took it, brought it back to Longmont where he lived, and it wasn't very good quality. So he crossed it with the better fruit quality and grew it on and a bunch of seedlings, and he found one that had the good fruit quality of the biennial black raspberry, but the primocane nature of the seed parent. And so this one gives you two crops, because these are you don't mow it to the ground. You let the biennial part live. It gives you a summer crop when the second year growth comes out on the first cane. In the meantime, the canes come up from the roots, and then they give you a fall crop. And so it's really something else. These aren't as juicy as the red raspberries, but they have a really unique and wonderful flavor. So the one thing you want to do with these is not mix them with the red raspberries, with the other primo cane raspberries. You want to keep them as far away on your property because they can share viruses with contaminated aphids that will suck viruses out of the sap of the feeding from one to the other. So you keep them as far away as you can. So I noticed that I had forgotten to put this on the list, so you might want to put this down on the list under raspberries. This is actually a blackberry. It's called Prime Arc Freedom. This is a thornless, that's where the freedom name comes from, a thornless primocane blackberry. So you can, in this case, you can mow that to the ground and still get a blackberry thicket without having the thorns. And so it came out of the University of Arkansas. That's where the arc comes from. So excited about this one. And this one is available like at Stark Brothers or Gurney's mail order companies. You can get these. I saw them, I just looked them up and still have them for sale. Haven't sold out yet. The next one we're going to be talking about gooseberries and currants. So Comanche gooseberry was the #1 from the Cheyenne Station. Is anybody here that don't really know what the Cheyenne Station is? Well, it was a USDA horticulture station that opened up in 1929 and closed in 1974. And it was just west of the Air Force Base. And their mission was to collect plants from around the world and to test out ones that would be able to grow in Wyoming, in the high plains. And the Great Depression had just started, and they put the central high plains one in Cheyenne. They put the northern Great Plains one in Mandan, North Dakota, and the southern Great Plains down in Woodward, Oklahoma. So they're really trying hard to create jobs because the Great Depression had just happened, and there was millions of families that no longer could make a living. So there's a CCC camp there that built the Cheyenne Station. And at that same time, their #1 mission at that time was food. And so they brought in 1,500 different types of fruit trees, pears and cherries and apples and mulberries, and tested them out. In the meantime, they started testing out all the other food crops that were known to be hardy in our climate. And the #1 was the European gooseberries. But the colonists had already brought them in when we first settled this country in the original 13 colonies. And we had powdery mildew here. And in Europe, it wasn't known yet. And so when they brought the Europeans, they all just got covered with powdery mildew, which killed the plants. And so they thought, well, there's native gooseberries here, but the native gooseberries hadn't overgone centuries of human selection for fruit quality and size like the Europeans one did. So we were stuck with with American gooseberries, which are still tasty but much smaller. And so the Cheyenne Station said, well, we don't have a climate that's really conducive too much to powdery mildew. Let's try them again. So they brought all the European gooseberries to Cheyenne and tried them out, yet they still got powdery mildew. They were still there, but one. And it was called, this particular one at the time, it was called Red Jacket. But in the meantime, a Canadian gooseberry had been named Red Jacket. And so they changed the name to Comanche. And when the station closed in '74, Gene Howard knew that these plants are abandoned. I need to save it. So he dug it up and planted it in his yard. 20 years passed, and I met him. And as the new propagator at Fort Collins Wholesale, he goes, you need to start growing Comanche and let me take cuttings of it. And it is so beloved now that Plant Select has promoted it as a Plant Select winner. It has this really delicious, crispy flavor to it, but at the nursery, it's so thorny with triplet thorns at each node that we call it blood wrencher. Because we hate having to take cuttings or even loading it onto trucks because your hands are just destroyed by those sharp thorns. So be wary about it. But it doesn't get the powdery mildew, at least not in Wyoming and Colorado. So another one is, this is a gooseberry blackcurrant hybrid out of Oregon State that is named Tasty Berry. And that's really a wonderful one. The fruit's not as big as the Comanche, but it's just as tasty and grows fantastically, maybe higher yielding. Now the difference between a gooseberry and a currant, which we're going to talk next, is gooseberries are thorny and currants are not. So these are European plants, Ribes sativum, which grows into Scandinavia and northern Europe, and they're really popular because it was a European native plant. So the Europeans love these because for centuries people ate these currants. And so when you go to European grocery stores, you see currants there, being sold by the pound. And the one Red Lake came out of the University of Minnesota in the 1950s, tops at Cheyenne in testing. And the one on the right, Blanca, came out of Czechoslovakia, and it's missing the pigment that makes it red. So it's just tastes nearly the same, but it's white. Now the next one is the European black currant, Ribes nigrum, and this one's called Allegan. And the Europeans love black currants. The English use it to make baby juice. It's called Ribena. The French use it to make it's called cassis, and it's a liqueur, a strong liqueur that's made from black currants. The Germans take the leaf because they have a really unique scent to them and make soap out of it. And the Russians will take the leaves because it grows near to the Arctic Circle, and they make it into a substitute for green tea. They dry the leaves and make tea out of it. It can grow in sun or in part shade, but it is not very edible. So it truly should be, to me, it just doesn't taste good. So I bet probably some people might like it if you grew up in Europe and acquired that taste. But we have our own native currant that's similar to this one, but it tastes good. It's called the clove currant. This one, Crandall, was found in Kansas in 1888, and it had triple the size of the fruit, and they've never found one that's been as close to it. And it is so good that, people, if you ever go up in the mountains and you find currants and you eat them, you go, I suppose if I was lost in the woods, I could probably eat these, to keep me from starving. But if you found these, you'd eat all of them on Crandall. Not every clove currant tastes good, but every Crandall does. Crandall's been around for 150 years just about. And so we root these Crandalls from the USDA, had a germplasm repository in Corvallis, Oregon, and because of that, crandalls still exist today because we got it from the USDA. What's nice about this particular one is that it's native to the Rocky Mountains as well. It's native to Wyoming. There's a lot of them. I've seen them all over the place in Weston County, up near Newcastle. Gwen's Buffalo, this one was found in eastern Washington. They call it the clove currant because those flowers are not only ornamental and attractive, they smell like cloves. And not from just sticking your nose in it. You walk by and go, what's that clove smell? It's that strong. It's very beautiful fragrance. And then it has what's missing a lot in Western gardens. It has red fall color. And so it's got everything going for it. It's not thornless. It can grow in shade. It does better with added irrigations, but it doesn't thrive, but it survives on natural precipitation. But the fruit quality is greatly decreased if you just let it go and don't do anything about it. It does have a really serious problem with a bug. It's called the imported currant worm, and it's a sawfly, lays the eggs on it, and then these tiny little larvae, you can't even barely see it, just start chewing on the leaves. And you look down and you go, there's something been eating my leaf. And then you say, you walk away, you come back a couple of days later, there's nothing left of your leaves. They'll eat everything. And by that time, these little larvae are huge. So the best way, because they are an edible plant, who wants to spray pesticides on your plant, is to hand pick them. And so if you don't want to touch them, you probably don't want these. But you can, Whitney, do you have any suggestions on how you deal with these?
I mean, inject water in a hose sometimes, not so much at all.
Yes, very well.
Yeah, well, and I've tried that too, because I get them on my rooted cuttings, and so I'll spray them off, but then they just fall into the pots, and because my plants are only this big, they just crawl back up. But maybe if you had, a taller plant, then they would probably have a harder time doing that.
And the other thing is to catch them early, because when the eggs hatch, they feed and just make little tiny holes in the middle of the leaf. And as they get bigger, then they work on the edge. But look for the tiny little holes.
Okay. Good. And the other thing is, I think if you took like a tarp or cardboard and put them underneath, and then maybe wash them down so they fell onto the cardboard, then you could take the cardboards away and throw the cardboard away. So this pest is serious enough that I want to tell people about, to just be aware of it.
Do those same pests bother the crandall?
They don't seem to. They really don't, because I think, again, they came probably from Europe, where the other currants and gooseberries came from, and we just don't see them on the crandall. And I don't see them on black currant either very much. Maybe it's the scent of that makes them less attractive. Grapes. So this is my old house, and I planted this grapes. Every one was a different variety, because when I'd been in the Army, and I was knowing that I was going to get out and use the GI Bill to get a degree in horticulture, and I was going to start my own business, an edible plant business that I mentioned to you. So I started writing to these horticultural giants who had been breeding cold hardy fruits. And this man, Elmer Swenson, was a farmer in northern Wisconsin, and he'd been breeding grapes for 60 years. And when I wrote him his first letter, he was 80. and he invited me to come see him. And he told me I was at NATO headquarters in Belgium, and he said, when you get back to the States, come see me. I'll send you some cuttings. We'll get you started. He says, you know, people forget about me now that I'm old, but I've never stopped breeding. I never stopped breeding grapes, and I've still got lots of ones I'd want to share with you. And so he sent me a box of them. And they were all numbered selections, and I tested them for 10 years. And I wrote him letters back because the internet wasn't even around then. And he said, thanks for the update. You know, you here, and he'd send me the new one that he had, and they all had numbered selection. I said, oh, thanks for 11247. That's really a good one. I really like it. You should name that one. And I said, in fact, I think you should name 12675. And all these numbers. And so he said, can you call me? But that was when long distance was a lot of money. So I'd rather just write a letter and put a stamp on it. So I called him up, and he said, oh, Scott, you know, I know that those are really good varieties, but, you know, you go ahead and name them. I don't know what to name them. You know, I just named them after towns in Wisconsin or Catholic saints. And so I said, all right, I will. So by that time I was at the nursery. So I had permission from him. I started growing them. And this one I named Flambeau Seedless because it was a pink grape, and Flambeau sounded like a reddish kind of name, and it was a lake in Wisconsin. And evidently he told a lot of people, you go ahead and name it. And so someone else named it Somerset Seedless, so it's got two names now. So you can find that under both names. So I think Somerset's actually got the upper hand because you see it more often on the internet. The next one is he developed, this one's he had named La Crosse, place in Wisconsin, and it makes a wine grape like Riesling, a Germanic style. His grapes have started a wine industry around the Twin Cities near the Mississippi River in Minnesota. He actually worked for the University of Minnesota as a retiree and got his grapes noticed by people like Dr. Cecil Stuchnoff and Peter Hempstead. And so 4 of his varieties were released by the University of Minnesota. And his grapes were used in breeding later on at the University of Minnesota, including this one, Marquette, which makes a red wine, hardy to Minnesota. And it was, what makes a good wine is sugar, because sugar is converted into alcohols. And so when you try Marquette just fresh off the vine, it's sweet, it's delicious. And it's, in my yard, it is just by far the highest yielder. It's fresh, good for fresh eating, not to make wine out of it at all. It is not seedless, it has seeds. But you can make jams and jellies out of it, or just make juice and just prevent it from fermenting. This one came out of South Dakota State, and this is hardy to 50 below zero in some testing. That doesn't mean it's going to be perfectly hardy, because it can take 50 below zero, but if it comes out of dormancy during a warm spring, and then we get 10-degree cold front come through, it can do a lot of damage that way. But nonetheless, it's a really excellent one, and this one's really vigorous. And the one that's probably gone the furthest of all the ones was St. Teresa. And so this is one where I took Elmer's suggestion and named it after a Catholic saint. So I wasn't raised Catholic, so I didn't know the saints. And so I went to the library and got a book on saints. And I'm going through, like, trying to find the perfect saint to name this grape after. And I came to St. Teresa, and she was a Carmelite nun from the 1920s. And what she was known for was that everywhere she went, she planted flowers for God. And so they knew Sister Teresa had come by. And so she was known as the Little Flower, and that's when I read about her. I named it after her. And so this one, I think because of the name, has really helped. It's gone from coast to coast in the temperate zone areas, and it's here it's zone 8, or excuse me, it's pH 8, so it's very alkaline tolerant, so it's really a good one for us. And I've been selling this one at the Cheyenne Farmers Market all those 23 years, and they're all over town. And so people really love that one. This is something that and it's sweet too. Do you know it?
No, I was just wondering if it was.
Oh, it's very sweet. It's not like a Thompson seedless, that's so sweet. This one still has a little bit of tartness to it, but sweet enough. If you grow grapes, this is what's called leaf pruning. So you prune the leaves off so that the sun hits your clusters so that they ripen and have better, the sunshine develops the sugar better. This shows like what vineyards in western Colorado and in the mountainous regions of Europe do to prevent their crop from being destroyed if a cold front comes at the wrong time. Just thousands of fires, because they can really make a lot of money with wine grapes. And they'll go to a big thing. So if you notice my first slide, I didn't have them, to make fruit sweeter like this one. I was growing these to make plants. So I'd take cuttings off of those plants about the Thanksgiving, and I would make 2-node cuttings. I'd store them in bundles and sand throughout the wintertime in an unheated garage. And at end of March, I take them out and I stick them in these cells. About 2 weeks later, and put them in warmth of this greenhouse, the buds start to come. And about 2 weeks after that, they all root and come. They're really quite easy to grow. And so there's more than one reason to grow grapes. You can grow them for just shade. And doesn't that look good? Just to have the shade of a veranda. How much more time do we have?
We're about at our limit.
Okay. Well, yes.
Since you and Dr. Finch are both here, just wondering, earlier he talked of using a stem from raspberries that has pith and saving that for the next gardening season. And then I heard you say that mow them off and get rid of the growth in the fall. So how do we balance that, those two things?
Well, what I think is that in the case of raspberry cane borer, that's what this insect is doing, is they're using the pith as a home for a destructive pest. And so you have to make the choice on something like that. Whereas like currants probably doesn't have a destructive pest, they're using that as a overwintering device.
Got a board too.
Do they? Okay.
Further down.
Yeah, so
I mean, you could pour, if there's a bug in it, you pour that out, and then you use the rest of it.
oh right, yeah, that could be, because my method is just to mow it up and then just rake it up and get rid of it. But if you wanted to do that to provide habitat for, you can look for, because you can see where a raspberry cane gone in, because there's like a big knot where they've gone in there, and a hole usually with some frass coming out of it where you can see that. So if you don't have that, 'cause it probably wouldn't take that long to go through your patch to do that. Good point. Any other? Yes.
I didn't even talk about it, but on trees, on the fruit trees, sometimes there's just mixed information on the internet as to how you need to prune those trees. So I have like a Mount Royal plum, I have apples, all that kind of stuff. Should you be pruning the central leader off of those trees, or should you let those grow?
I usually will grow to a central leader, and but you can prune it and then it becomes a vase shape. You can do that, but I always think that it's better just central leader growth, because if you cut it off, then you're just leaving the main trunk as a source for rot to spread into the center. But fruit trees usually, other than apples, aren't very long-lived anyway, usually. The pears can be long-lived, but when it comes to pruning, you want to, this is what I learned when I was at the nursery, is Gary Epstein was the owner of the nursery, said, you want to pretend that you have a volleyball in your hand, and you're weaving the volleyball through the main tree. You want to have about a volleyball's width between the branches. And so if you have if there's two branches that come out that are only 6 inches apart, choose one and cut it off. And that's how you do that. And anything that grows back into the center of the tree, you get rid of. This water sprouts that come out, get rid of. Anything that comes from the rootstock, cut that off. And there's that's a whole class in itself, and how to do it right. But that was some really big advice that I got from him. And also, fruit trees, if you have closer to from 60 degrees to 90 degrees, has more fruiting spurs. So if you have it closer to 90 degrees, you develop more fruiting spurs. So that's where branch spreaders can come in. If you have a branch like this and say that's my head's there, put a branch and you kind of force it down as much as you can with a spreading stick, and then after about a season or so, then that branch has enough lignin formed where it stays. Okay, thank you.